friends. Thanks for joining us again for Embracing Your Season. I'm super excited about our conversation today because this is a friend, actually someone that I asked to be my friend, let's be honest. And you'll hear more about that story when we get into it. But this is Whitney Bandemer. She is a recovering lawyer. Now, those are her words. She'll tell more about that as well. She is an organizational architect, a change nerd, and experienced people leader. She is presently the principal at WB Consulting LLC, based in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Her consulting practices specialize in organizational and people development. I think you'll really enjoy the conversation that we have today because she digs into being vulnerable, asserting your needs, figuring out how to find trusted people so that you can make the best and wisest decisions. So stay tuned and listen to this episode of Embracing Your Season with my special guest, Whitney Bandemer. Whitney, I'm so excited that you're joining us today on Embracing Your Season. I mean, let's go a little bit into how you and I met, because I think this is additive to the conversation about being assertive. So as an adult, for instance, we don't get to meet friends the way we used to when we were in school or when we were in college and meeting people. And so I find that this is really important in my life, that if I want to gain wisdom or be mentored or just walk alongside people that I find quite fascinating, I like to ask them to coffee. I like to ask them almost on a date. And it's so weird. I'm sure when you got my text and it said, I want to be your friend, can we go out to coffee? Were you a little startled by that? Was that scary at all for you? Maybe that's what we'll talk about.
It wasn't scary. I appreciated it.
Yeah.
Because it's absolutely true. As you become an adult and you're in different seasons of life, it becomes harder and harder to meet people.
Yeah.
And I didn't find it scary, although it was very funny when we sat down to coffee and you basically said, "You're my friend now."
I know, right?
And I'm like, okay.
So you have no choice, right?
Right.
Like it is inevitable.
Exactly. Luckily, I was open to be recruited.
Okay. Love
was
that.
open to be recruited. Actually, it was refreshing to have somebody say, "Hey, I think you're interesting. I think we have things in common."
Yeah.
And the fact is, as we got to talking, we do. And then I'm like, "No, I want to be your friend as well."
Yes.
And the fact that we could say that to each other is really refreshing, because so many times as an adult, there's so many barriers and unknowns and so much vulnerability that's required to reach out and say, I need something.
Yeah.
Because you don't know how the other person will receive it.
That's right.
So yeah, it was really refreshing, but mostly hilarious.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Well, good. And now we are friends, and now we're getting to have this conversation so everyone can benefit from the conversation we even had talking about needs and being assertive. But before we get there, I would love for you to talk about your transition as a lawyer now into a consultant, a wife, and a mama. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I am a late bloomer. I did a very traditional college, law school path, and then got a job at a law firm, worked there for 3 years, and realized that professional lifestyle was not for me. It's good work. It's important work. It just is not what I'm designed to do or how I'm designed to do it. And I had a really unique opportunity to move back to my hometown and help start a brand new pharmacy school as a mission-driven economic development project. And I did that for 5 years as an in-house lawyer. I became a pharmacy law professor in a pharmacy program. I became a higher ed executive, and I was there for 5 years. But I got to be about 34 years old and never married, no children, in a place where there's about 900 people. And I was finding that I loved being near my family, but I had to drive 90 minutes to have the kind of social life that I wanted. And I wanted to get married and have a family. And so God created a path for me to come to Northeast Indiana. And it was an unlikely kind of trajectory, right? Because you never see it coming until you look back and go, oh, that makes sense now, right?
I love
At the
how he
time,
does
I was
that.
like, okay, I guess I'm going to Fort Wayne. Could someone show me a map? And so I came to Fort Wayne and I worked in higher ed, continued that process. I was no longer a hired lawyer. So for the first time in my life, not only did I leave the South for the first time, leave my family the second time. I also left being a hired lawyer. So it was a big transition to just doing administrative work in higher ed and being a professor. And I really enjoyed that lifestyle and loved Fort Wayne, but thought I'll be here 3 or 5 years, on my way to being a college president.
Little did you know, Fort Wayne sucks you in, huh?
It's like a vortex. You can't get out.
It is.
Once you get in, you can't get out. And so I met my husband in Leadership Fort Wayne. And 3 years later, we got married. 10 months after that, we had a baby.
Yes.
All at 40 years old.
Yeah, girl. Yeah.
So I was a very late bloomer, particularly for this part of the country. So it was really, interesting. You mentioned making friends and sharing needs as a single woman in her late 30s, never married, no children, very career focused. I was, I think a unicorn is putting it too flat, or it's too much flattery. I didn't, you line me up with everybody else and like, what's the one thing that doesn't fit? And it was me. And it was very hard to find community because most people my age had at that point middle schoolers, if not high schoolers, and they'd been married at this point for 5 or 10 years. So it was really challenging, and dating was really hard. And I was really blessed to find my husband and that we were in alignment to make that quick transition to dating, married, newlyweds, parents, all within 3 years.
Wow.
And at the same time, I was going through a career transition. I had left one university, gone to another, and was there for 14 months, had another transition where I had decided I need to redefine my career. And so I became an accidental consultant. I did not plan on this. And my husband would tell you, I came into it kicking and screaming. We sat around the table in our house, and I said, I just don't want to be one of those women who can't get a quote real job.
Oh my.
And he just kind of looks at me. He owns his own business also. He's a lawyer. So he's like, what do you think I do? Right. And I said, no, but you're not a consultant. I mean, what is that? But this is the path that God had for me. It's very clear now.
Yes.
But I got a client, which was a Christian-based organization right out of the gate. And I committed to 3 months with them. And at the end of that 3rd month, I already had 3 other clients and was on my way to meeting my first year revenue goal.
So cool.
But it was all based on experiences that I had in higher ed. So the transition to being a consultant for me was easy because the groundwork had been laid, unbeknownst to me, in my early years in Fort Wayne, when I didn't know anyone, when I was trying to build a network, when I was trying to meet people. I was actually creating a personal and professional network that I would then call and rely on as I was leaving my career in higher ed and starting my consultancy. I was able to reach back out to that network, around 70 to 80 people who graciously sat down with me and talked through, what I wanted to do and what I was interested in. And then other consultants, Michelle Gladio and Sally Stitzer, who came alongside me and said, hey, this is how you do it. And how can we help? And it was just great community. But it's because I reached out and sat down with those 70 or 80 people and said, this is what I'm going through. This is what I want to do. Do you have any advice for me? Can you help me? And that was a real lesson in asking for what you need, being willing to be vulnerable and understand that other people connect with that.
Love that.
And also that people want you to ask them to help you.
Mm-hmm.
They want people to ask for their help and expertise. And so that was critical in my transition to being a consultant. The other part of it was the work that I did in higher ed for someone else actually became the core parts of what I do for clients now. So the stuff that I fell in love with in my career working for somebody else is what I've been able to create for myself in my own business. So that foundation and that experience made it possible for me to do what I do now. It also makes me a better wife and mother. I'll tell you, it is not easy to try to do all things at once, right? Figure out how to be married and then be pregnant and then figure out how to take care of a baby together, all while moving and starting a new job and going through a career crisis.
Yeah.
Like all that happened between 2018 and 2021.
Oh, golly. So the pandemic on top of that, right?
Oh, and that little thing. Yes. Yeah. That small thing.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So that was a lot to do. And it required a lot of support and a lot of asking for help. But it's been great fun, and I couldn't be happier. It's the best job I've ever had. It gives me a lot of flexibility to be with my daughter, who's now 4. I'm able to pick her up from school almost every day. My husband takes her almost every day. So she gets a lot of mom and dad time because we're blessed to be able to work for ourselves.
Yeah, the flexibility of that. So I heard 2 things here that I wanted to point out. The first all is that like you are able to look back and say, God has created this path. It reminds me of the Bible verse, right? We can plan in our hearts our course, but the Lord determines our steps. Like praise God for that, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so in that, I think maybe if it's even, which is the title of our podcast here, embracing your season, and how even that you didn't understand it, now you do. You see how God has blessed your steps. But then also, and this is where I would love to dig in, is just asking your needs, recognizing your needs, and then asking people to come alongside you, being intentional with that. So there's a personality element to that. But can you speak to what, for those that maybe it isn't a personality to ask for help, what are some pieces of wisdoms to ask for help, ask for their needs, be vulnerable, anything that you want to dig into that for the people?
Well, the Bible says that to make good decisions, and obviously this is a paraphrase, to make good decisions, you need a multitude of counselors. And when I made a choice to leave one job and go to another, there was a still small voice that I ignored.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I came to church, actually. I was leading a yoga group at church, and my pastor was one of my students. And I announced that I'd made this major transition, and he got this look on his face.
Oh, I've seen that look. That's how I got my job here.
This was not a positive look.
Oh, I see. Okay.
There's this look. And I noted it. Didn't say anything about it. He and I didn't discuss it, but I noted it. And then a couple of years later, because I made a choice that was not consistent with, there's just a little tickle, in the back of your spirit and your heart that I looked over, I pushed through. I came back to him and said, hey, I see now that I did not listen to the tickle. And I know that I didn't because I didn't go ask the people I normally ask when I make big decisions. Because good decisions are made with a multitude of counselors. And so the next big decision I had to make, I went back to him and said, okay, I know what I didn't do the first time. And I don't need your permission, but you're a counselor of mine. And then I told him the story. I said, well, that face you made at yoga. And he goes, yeah, because I was shocked. I hadn't heard anything about that. And so I learned a really important lesson that I make better decisions and I make aligned decisions when I ask other people.
That's good.
Because humans are terrible. Our brains are not designed to be good assessors of things always. So when I look at something, it's going to be colored and shaped by my biases, right? And those are natural. Everybody has them. It's the way we were raised, our experiences, all those things, our traumas. So I can't rely solely on my judgment because I can't see the whole picture because my picture is colored by who I am. So I don't look at it as, oh, I need somebody's help. I need somebody else's perspective. So I would challenge people who hesitate to ask for help. You're not asking for help. You're asking for more data.
Wow. Yeah, that's good.
You're going to people and saying, how do you see this so that I can make sure I know what I don't know, so I can identify my blind spots, right? And had I had those conversations when I made that decision that wasn't the best decision, when I ignored that little voice, I might have picked up on that. But I didn't ask all the people I normally ask. I relied heavily on myself. And so we make better decisions when we have more information. And I think that's the first piece. I think the second piece is be careful who you ask. When I coach professionals or people who are looking to grow in their career, change their career, we talk first and always, and even in my learning and development programs through Lead Boldly, we start first with know yourself. And how do you know yourself? So people are like, how do I become self-aware? Well, reflection, journaling, reading. But one important piece of that is finding people you trust and asking them, but it has to be people who've earned the right to hear your story. Brene Brown talks about this in her research. But vulnerability is sharing with someone who's earned the right to hear that, not somebody who's going to judge or tear you down or criticize, somebody who's going to meet you where you are and work productively to help you.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So finding people that you trust. And so I have those people, right? PM, my parents, my church mother from college, Karen, don't make a decision without checking in with her. A former mentor at the law firm, I check in with him. There are people, and some of them are church, religious, spiritual based people, and some of them are not. Some of them are people who are in that business or in that industry, or who see me in a social way, as opposed to people who just know me professionally or just know me through church, right? To get a multitude of input. And again, it's not help. You're not out begging. You're collecting data. And you can be the judge of that data. You don't have to accept what somebody else says, but to authentically and objectively take it and say, is there something to this? Helps you make better decisions and helps you to grow and advance.
Yeah. Yeah. Would you say for somebody that maybe doesn't feel like they have those people in their life, like how can they find them? What are some flags or in people's personalities that they can start drawing those people into their life?
That's a great question. I always recommend from a professional standpoint that people build their own board of directors.
Oh, yeah.
You have a personal board of directors. And it's hard to do this if you don't have connections and you don't have a big network. And this will take some courage, I think, for lots of folks to do some version of what you did.
Yeah.
Maybe not say you're going to be my friend.
Not a directive, but a suggestion or a question.
Or a question, right? Right. Always start out with curiosity.
Yeah.
If at church, where can I go to get connected?
That's good.
I'm looking for professional, spiritual, personal mentorship. Where can I go and find that? Or look at find someone in your community that you admire and you aspire to have an experience like they do, or a job like they do, or a family like they do, and go to them and say, can we have coffee? I'd like to learn more about how you did this. And just being honest. And if you can't do it in person, do it over email, right? But you will find almost 100% of the time, people will not say no. Yeah, that's awesome. People will not say no, and they will refer you to somebody else. They'll say, well, I might not be the person, but let me connect you with so-and-so, and they can help you. But it's really that step of faith of stepping out and saying, okay, I'm just going to kind of put my toe in here and ask a curious question. And the worst thing that somebody can say is no, or not right now, or not me, but somebody else. And again, that's a data point. So now okay, not them, but now you've got some practice and you know that the not now or I'm not the person doesn't hurt that much, and it's not a personal attack.
Right. The worst that can happen to be no. Yeah. And what do you do with that? You just move on to someone else.
Correct.
Yeah, that's great. So in establishing or talking about the things that we need in order to grow, how can we integrate some of the language or wisdom that you've offered here into our marriages? Like just talking to our spouses about what we need. How can we integrate some of those conversations?
It's funny to me. I've only been married for 5 years. Um, that I still have to fight through some fear sometimes, and not because my husband and I have a wonderful relationship. I don't. I can honestly say I don't think we've ever had like a true like argument. We banter and bicker a lot because it's two lawyers in the house,
Oh,
right?
yeah, sure. Yeah.
But I do still find that there's a hesitance when I have something vulnerable that I want to share because I don't know how it's going to hit him. And I fear that rejection or I fear the silence. What if he doesn't say anything? And so that's a real thing, figuring out how do you have those open relationships with someone that you must have those open
Sure. Yeah,
conversations
absolutely.
with.
It's important.
And what I have learned is I sometimes, this sounds funny, but have to tell him what to say.
Okay, sure. Tell me how that sounds.
Because we will have conversations and sometimes he does respond with silence, not because he's judging me or he thinks I'm crazy, but because he's not sure what to say.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
so he actually says, I need you to tell me what you need.
Ooh.
And so I can start out with, hey, I'm really stressed about this and I need some support and comfort. And then I tell him whatever I have to tell him. And he knows what the appropriate and needed response is. It's not that he doesn't understand or he's not smart enough to figure it out, but he doesn't want to get it wrong either. Yeah. So it's so much easier for me to say, I'm really frustrated with this and I don't want you to try to fix it.
So from the gate, you make it clear your expectations.
I don't need you to fix this, but I need to talk about it because I'm an external processor. And so telling him what I need makes it easier for him to respond in a way that is helpful to me. I fought this because I felt like you should just know what to say. I should have to tell you what to say to me. And then I realized, well, of course, he's not a mind reader. He doesn't just intuitively know. And now we don't always get this right? I mean, maybe 2 out of 3 times, but we don't always get this right. But it really helps to realize and accept that as much as he loves me, he cannot read my mind. Yeah. As much as he loves me, he doesn't understand like every single thing I need. And that's okay. Yeah. And I can just tell him, this is what I need from you today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So what I love about what you're talking about is that your partner obviously wants to love you, but you are loving them well by sharing what you need with them, right? Like you are able to express to them, like, I know you love me. You don't know what to say, but here, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to give you this gift of like, this is what I need from you. And that's love. So we also talked about how it takes vulnerability. You mentioned that it takes vulnerability and there's some fear there that then your partner won't meet that need for you, won't desire to, which isn't often the case, which is why we push through that fear, right? So let's talk about for our kiddos, how can we help them overcome that fear, that vulnerability to express their needs and learn to be assertive? So what is some wisdom to help raise kids to be assertive in expressing their needs?
I think demonstrating that we're willing to learn to do it ourselves. When we demonstrate that we're willing to be vulnerable with other people in front of our kids, I think that sends an important message to them. And even as small children, my child's 4, and one of the commitments I've made is that she should be comfortable and embrace having feelings. They shouldn't control her life, but it's okay that she has them. I think sometimes we, in the name of teaching our kids to be strong, we dismiss their feelings. Mm-hmm. And so starting with saying, hey, I understand you're frustrated. Hey, I understand you're angry. All of those things. But also sharing when you're having that emotion. And a friend of mine gave me this example years before I had a child. My friend Melanie had a little girl. We were on a girls' trip, maybe even somebody's bachelorette trip, and we were talking about kids. And she might have been the only person on the trip with a child. And she told the story about driving her daughter to school. And her daughter said, Mom, like, I'm really scared. And Mel's response was, I'm scared too.
Yeah, that's good.
And that really stuck with me. And so I really try very hard to identify my emotions for my daughter so that she can see what they look like, even when it's I'm angry or I'm sad. And I think that starts planting those seeds of vulnerability. It's okay to say, I'm having a hard time right now. It's not a sign of weakness. It's not a sign that, you're struggling. It's that today, in this moment, in this season, I'm having a hard time. And to me, that's where vulnerability starts. And then also teaching our kids who they can trust and how to identify a trusting person.
Yeah, that's so good.
Because that's who we want them to share with, and accepting that it's not always going to be me.
Yep.
Right. You can trust me and you can trust Daddy, but there are other people in your life you can trust, and identifying those people for our kids.
Gosh, that's such good wisdom. Thank you so much, Whitney.
Oh, thank you.
I would love for people to find your information and connect with you. So how can they find your resources and maybe email you, website? Share that with us as well.
Absolutely. Well, I'm on LinkedIn every day. My marketing guy says I have to post every day, so I'm there. Okay. Whitney Bandemer. But you can also find me on my website, which is WB Consulting LLC, and that's Whitney at wbconsultingllc.com.
Awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. This was such a really valuable conversation about asserting our needs and teaching our kids and implementing that in our own marriages. So thanks again for joining me.
Thanks, Paige.
Hey friends, I am sure that just like me, you have a couple of things that you are taking away to implement in your family, with your spouse, and with your kiddos. There's some amazing pieces of information, but here's what I would love for you, or what I took away from our conversation with Whitney. First one, that we should have a multitude of counselors in our lives in order to make decisions, in order to just have community so that we can be healthy and whole. But the reason why having a multitude of counselors is super important is because we have blind spots. We have biases that we bring into our day-to-day life, as well as those bigger decisions. So Whitney was able to discuss with us the importance of why we're having tons of people and choosing wisely. She also indicated that we need to make sure that we have trusted people that should be in our lives, that we should be discerning. We should be careful of who we are choosing to be vulnerable with, that have earned the right to hear our story. Whitney discusses the importance of not only having a multitude of people so that we can learn from and grow with, that challenge us and lead us in the right direction, finding alignment in the decisions that we need to be making for the health of our family as well as ourselves, but to also choose wisely who we are inviting into our lives. So second takeaway, we have to be open and honest about what we need from the people in our lives. So in this example here, Winnie was able to discuss her partnership and her marriage, how her husband wants to come alongside her, but he doesn't always know what to say and what she needs. So one of the first conversations, or the first points of the conversation she has with her partner, is, I just need to vent. I don't need a solution. I don't need you to tell me what to do. Instead, I just need you to listen. Imagine how that can transform our conversations with our spouses, with our coworkers, our neighbors, across the board. We get to be vulnerable with those people and sharing what our needs are, but also helping them understand what their role is in that conversation. And finally, the third takeaway is, how can we implement some of these things for our kiddos now? How can we help them grow in their vulnerability, grow in asserting their needs? And Whitney says that we need to be modeling this well. So we get to share our emotions and appropriately so that they can see, what does anger look like? They get to see, how does mom and dad process sadness? When they see that we can be vulnerable, that we can share these deep and sometimes hard emotions, they can learn from that. And it also encourages them to be vulnerable as well. Another important part that she emphasized for raising our kiddos to be healthy is teaching them who they can trust. Right. We oftentimes, I grew up in the 80s, we oftentimes talk about stranger danger. But in fact, we need to be talking about how do we identify people that our kids can trust. We know from research, Cara Powell, for instance, is one that talks about this frequently, that our kids need 3 to 5 trusted adults that align with our Christian values so that they can go to those people in times when they can't come to us. This is super valuable, but our kids don't always know who those people are. So helping them from a young age identify what makes a trusted friend, a trusted adult, someone that they can walk alongside with life, because they're not always going to come to us. So those are my takeaways today with my conversation with Whitney. I hope that you've enjoyed it. Again, I just think it's so valuable. She has you have our contact information. So if you'd like to email her or check out her resources, that's going to be in the podcast notes. Again, thank you for joining us, for embracing your season. I'll see you next time.